You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. It is October 30th, 2023. And we're here with the same old Knuckleheads, but we got some different topics to talk about today. A lot of times we have a guest, but today we're just kind of going over some of the recent news and giving it our take. Some of the topics we're going to be talking about today are the House Speaker saga, which has been just kind of crazy with the Republicans and I guess the story of McCarthy, Gates, and now Johnson. So these are kind of weird path we've taken. We're going to talk a little bit about the sad state of our education, which it never seems to be in a good state with our public education. So
that's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah, and finally, we're going to talk a little bit about Hillary, our sort of our big brother out there who wants to kind of be molding what we're thinking there, and so we'll talk a little bit about that in our Knucklehead Noise Patrol. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And in our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your guest. And our invisible hand is James Just, and we just don't give him enough accolades. So thanks, James, for being there as our invisible hand. And he's the one who kind of will be moving things around for us and stuff during the show. Okay, well, let's get into the speaker issues. So the in the last election cycle, the House went over to the Republicans by 5 votes, and they wound up then getting the speaker in, and that wound up being Mike McCarthy. But it has been anything but a smooth ride.
Kevin
McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy. Yeah, it's not even smooth for me. Him getting it, me getting his name right. Well, but anyways, for Kevin McCarthy, and yeah, it was something where maybe we could get the visual, James. He wound up taking a historic 15 ballots before enough Republicans came behind him to get him through. And some of the issues were that groups like the Freedom Caucus, they really wanted reforms, and they weren't happy with the same old deal making going on behind the scenes. And there's some of them who are really upset with the levels of debt and that we just aren't addressing this stuff. And so this is kind of the backdrop to why it took so many. And so they wrangled a bunch of concessions out of him. And by the way, the guy who was instrumental in this is Matt Gaetz, and we're going to talk a little bit about him too as we go through this saga. But here's a Mother Jones article, and I kind of like it because they put they put a list here of the things that they got out of him in order to make him speaker. And there was a kind of some interesting things. One is that it only takes now one member of the House to essentially call a vote on the speaker if they have no confidence in him. So before, I think it took a group of at least 5, and
Yes.
now this kind of empowers individual members to say, hey, this just isn't right, what's going on here in the House. And that'll come into play as well as we go through the story. So just a little bit of foreshadowing. But there were some other issues too. One is they wanted to make it easier to cap some of the military spending. They wanted to give people at least 72 hours to read bills, which, if you remember people like Nancy Pelosi saying, hey, look, we can find out what's in these bills after we pass them.
Yes, yes.
Famous quote, right?
Yes.
But I mean, so these are some of the noble changes that some of these people were trying to get through. And so the charge was kind of led by Matt Gaetz, and there were some others as well, some notables, I think, for a little bit there. Marjorie Taylor Greene was in on it, and Chip Roy and some of these others were sort of leading the charge here. But eventually it was sort of almost Matt Gaetz standing by himself, getting as many of these as he could. And so that's sort of it gives you a sense a little bit about what some of the changes were. I don't know if either of you guys have any thoughts on any of those changes that came through that I might not have mentioned here that you thought were important changes.
Well, one of the big changes that they were trying to institute was that they were going to pass on individual votes all 12 appropriation bills for the budget, for the federal budget. That was a big deal for the Freedom Caucus. And in making the deal for Kevin McCarthy, who became the speaker, he had agreed to this. He had agreed to this change. This was major. And instead of having this large omnibus bill with everything included in it, everything and the kitchen sink included, they were going to do the individual bills. Now, when McCarthy made a little deal to avoid the government shutdown, he sort of violated that. That agreement.
Well, Leon, let's see. You're jumping right over into the next thing. So I just wanted to make sure that we had the points. So, but that definitely foreshadows the issue coming up. So we had this issue with, Matt Gaetz getting these points in for the speaker that, he agreed to this stuff when when people said they'd vote for him, he literally pretty much signed a pledge, I think, saying that, hey, this is what I'm going to do as your speaker. Okay. So it turned out that after, he got this power in recent negotiations, they wanted to essentially they were coming up on the budget spending limits, and of course Biden wanted more money, like an extra $100 billion or so to fund Ukraine as part of the spending package, and there were many Republicans who were not on board with this, and so in fact it was a majority of the Republicans who had said, hey, look, we think we've spent enough on Ukraine, we don't want to spend anymore. And then lo and behold, somehow the budget passes. And even though there was a majority of Republicans in the, majority, party in the House, it shouldn't have been able to pass, but it did. And it's because McCarthy turned around and cut a secret deal with Biden. And then with Democrat support wound up, pushing this budget through that had all this Ukraine spending in it, when there were many Republicans who wanted to see actual spending cuts, at least in other areas and such. And so this then preceded Matt Gaetz then to use that power that he had gotten as just one man standing up to call for the speaker to be voted out of office. And so in fact, here are two video clips. We're going to play one, comment just briefly, and then play the other, but of Matt Gaetz standing up in Congress and saying why he felt that Matt Gaetz had violated this agreement.
Kevin McCarthy had violated.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Kevin McCarthy. Sorry, boy, this Kevin McCarthy thing just is not going smoothly.
In more ways than the Speaker of the House has responded to these reports of a secret side deal on money for Ukraine, opaquely stating that he still wants to fund Ukraine and our border. I have a few replies to this statement. First, the Speaker's statement confirms the existence of a secret deal. And I have talked to members of our own leadership who have said they didn't even know that Speaker McCarthy was negotiating a secret side deal outside of our conference, outside of his own leadership team, for the sake of Ukraine. Second, Ukraine has lost the support of a majority of the majority. The last time there was a freestanding Ukraine vote on this floor, it was last week. 101 Republicans voted for it, 117 Republicans voted against it. According to the Hastert rule, which Speaker McCarthy agreed to in January, you cannot use Democrats to roll a majority of the majority, certainly on something as consequential as Ukraine. So for all the crocodile tears about what may happen later this week, about a motion to vacate, working with the Democrats is a yellow brick road that has been paved by Speaker McCarthy, whether it was the debt limit deal, the CR, or now the secret deal on Ukraine.
So that's Matt Gaetz, and he is standing up in front of Congress saying that, hey, look, this guy violated the agreement that he had given, and that's why we're trying to vote him out. And by the way, the other one of the other issues is the one that Leon brought up here too, and that's what Mike Gaetz is going to speak to in this next video clip about separating these things so that they're not just all packaged together like sausage, so that the American public can see these things voted on one after another. So maybe we could play that second video clip.
The American people deserve single subject bills. I get that a lot of folks might disagree with my perspectives on the border or on Ukraine, but can we at least agree that no matter how you feel about Ukraine or the southern border, they each deserve the dignity of their own consideration and should not be rolled together where they might pass where each individually wouldn't? This is what we're trying to get away from. This is the spirit of the January agreement we made with the Speaker. No more lashing these disparate issues together so that the American people's interests are subjugated here on the floor of the House.
So I don't know. To me, that sounds like music to my ears. I mean, this sounds like almost like a libertarian got in, is making some changes about making things much more transparent in Congress, and so that we can literally vote down stupid things that the people wouldn't be for, like maybe spending more money on that Ukraine war that Biden loves so much. So anyways, what do you guys think about this? This is pretty monumental, this kind of stuff, and it's coming from a Republican.
Well, you see, I think well, Gates is right. Okay, maybe people might disagree about his style. He was right in terms of McCarthy making this deal with Biden with the continuing resolution to avoid the shutdown. And my problem with this avoidance of the shutdown, everybody in the media is saying, oh, the Republicans will be blamed, for this. Well, I was wondering then, we are 1 year away from the next elections, which will occur in 2024. If now is not a time to fight for some of your principles, your in terms of the budget, or in terms of how you go about funding the government, if now is not a time to fight for that, when will be? So because the Republicans did everything to avoid the shutdown, why? When are we going to fight? When are we going to see a real fight about our spending? Our debt is out of control. Our deficit is at almost historic levels. So when are we going to fight? When are we going to save the country from the mountain of debt that is crushing us? And this is the problem, even though some will argue, well, McCarthy was a good conservative. He just wanted to put things off so that after the 45 days or whatever it is they agreed to, well, they could get back on the horse and start fighting. I am tired of seeing this can being kicked down the road. It's time we do something about this debt. The debt is crushing us. And if we don't do anything about it, we're going to be in real trouble. So
yeah, and real quick too, before you go on, let me just bring up the visual. We've shown this a lot of times on our show, but here is our debt to GDP, and you can see this is our Congressional Budget Office, and you can literally just see that this is what our government is projecting our debt is headed to. You know, the idea that it's just outstripping our productivity massively going into the future with no end in sight, and of course that comes at the expense of all of the things we could be doing with our resources. All be going to debt service. Right now, I think it's 15%. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there so you guys understand the consequence of what Leon's talking about there, and the idea that you know, these arguments over the debt ceiling are important. So anyways, hand it back to you guys.
And the other thing too. Now everybody criticized the fact that Matt Gaetz was this rabble rouser who was jumping up and down, and he caused the McCarthy to be kicked out of the speakership. The fact of the matter is, whether we like it or not, Kevin McCarthy agreed to one member of the House being able to file the motion to vacate. He agreed to it. So you may not like Matt Gaetz' style, but he lived by the rules that was set up in January, So Kevin McCarthy and company have to live with the consequences of that agreement. So here we are.
All righty, yeah. It reminds me of campaign promises made by politicians, and I wonder if he just agreed to these rules just to get in to become Speaker, McCarthy, if he did that, with the future intention of just not abiding by those rules as much as possible. Because
Tim, do you mean politicians don't being lied to by other politicians the way they do to all their constituents?
something like that, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Why don't we make Matt Gaetz the Speaker of the House? It sounds like he's one that would abide by any agreements that he entered into, and of course he's already philosophically in favor of these kinds of limitations, like segmenting the bills to vote individually on them, which that's a great idea, and this 72-hour thing instead of pass it, see what's inside of it stuff, this nonsense, this complete ridiculous set, how we're set up now. And no wonder we're 33 and plus almost 34 trillion in debt. No wonder. So I think I just wonder. Oh, also, are these rules going to be passed over to the next Speaker of the House, or is this just for this McCarthy guy?
No, the rules are in place right now. So, for instance, the new Speaker have to live by the rules that are in place unless the House vote to change them. So, like for instance, the motion to vacate, that is one member can file a motion to vacate, okay, and that rule is still in place. Now they can change it, but they will have to. The House members will have to vote on it, and if they vote on it, then it could be changed.
Okay.
There is one other thing too on that same note that that I've heard. I'm trying to Justin Amash speak on before. The idea of individual members having the freedom to be able to introduce things themselves without going through some committee of their party to be able to get things in. This is, I think, also one of the things that's in there as well, that members have more freedom now to be able to actually introduce things to the public, so you can hear them without having this filter of the party being able to just whatever the powers that be think is deemed okay to bring up in front of the entire Congress.
Yes.
And by the way, my liberal friends have voiced discontent with all this wrangling going on by the Republicans. They want the Republicans to just lay over and give Biden whatever he wants. So they look at this as a horrible thing that these evil Republicans are doing to the country. And meanwhile, these few people that put these rules in place are the only ones that have a semblance of an idea of where we're headed and how to try to avoid it. And so, they're the only ones doing anything that's worthwhile for the longevity of the country. But my liberal friends just don't like it because they want every bill passed, every spending thing done, whatever Democrats want, whatever they want, not Republicans, but Democrats, to no end. I mean, to absolutely no end. It just amazes me. It just amazes.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I'm not a particular fan of Matt Gaetz, but he made that one point that I really like, is that there have been a long-standing tradition. I don't know if it's really a house rule, but it's a long-standing tradition within the Republican conference that you cannot use the other party, the Democrats in this case, to overcome resistance in the Republican conference.
Well, I think it's the majority of the majority.
The majority of the majority, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, the majority of the majority. And Kevin McCarthy did this. He used the Democrats to get through that bill that averted the shutdown. So I mean, he really put himself in a difficult position with some of his own members in the Republican conference. So I mean, like I said, you may not like Gates' style, but as far as we can tell, he was living by the rules that were agreed to. So
Yeah.
you live with the consequences. So McCarthy lost the speakership.
Yeah. And these things certainly sound like a positive as far as I think libertarians are concerned. These things sound great. And I know there's a lot of other people who are sort of independent minded, not of the red, blue, gangs out there that
Yes.
would be our political representatives that actually really appreciate what happened here with Matt Gaetz taking a stand. But now, Tim, you raised a question. Well, why don't we just make Matt Gaetz the speaker? Well, part of the reason is because he pissed off an awful lot of Republicans when he went against the party leadership with this. So yeah. So I mean, you have to have like a huge majority. You have to get over like 209 people to support you, and there's no way he's kind of like persona non grata among the Republicans right now. But somebody did get in.
Well, except for probably the members of the Freedom Caucus, I don't think there's anybody else would support Gates for the speakership. Quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well.
And of course, I realize that all these things are impossible, and it almost seems like getting the debt, stopping the precipitous climb the debt is in the middle of doing right now. To stop that is probably equally impossible, but these are steps in the right direction, and
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to keep kicking the can down the road, like Leon said.
Yeah.
Well, hold on.
Yes.
Before you jump in, I want to get to these other clips before we have to break away from our public access audience. So let me jump to the point where there is a speaker now. We've actually gotten to the point where recently, I think last week or so, the Republicans, did manage to vote in a speaker, and his name is, I believe it's Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson, yes, of Louisiana, yes.
And so if you want to know, and by the way, here, can we get the visual up on this too? There's an article. So here it shows the House essentially cheering for the guy, and he's the guy right in the middle here. And we're going to hear a video clip or two of him, so you actually get to hear what this guy is capable of mentally, as far as his what kind of person we're going to have in there. And I actually thought it was quite refreshing. Maybe we could we have these two video clips in there of him interrogating the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mike Mayorkas, and this is the guy who's all about regulating your speech online and all this other kind of Orwellian stuff. And oh boy, this is Mike Johnson taking him to task. Can we roll clip number 3?
Before we move,
Secretary Mayorkas, we have the frustrating responsibility on this committee of providing oversight of your agency, but I have to be honest and tell you, I'm not sure exactly what you do at the Department of Homeland Security other than great harm. On your watch, the data is pretty clear. We've had record levels of illegal immigration, a rapid decline in deportations, skyrocketing fentanyl deaths across our country, and the Secret Service, which is a DHS component, can't determine who left cocaine at the White House. In the middle of all this, you created the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, CISA, which is a division of DHS. And it's one of the Biden administration agencies that colluded with and coerced the social media companies to censor Americans' protected free speech online. That's specifically detailed in a 155-page court opinion that came out of the federal court in Louisiana in the landmark litigation of Missouri v. Biden. Have you read that court opinion?
Congressman, I have not, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency does not censor speech.
Okay, well, the court found otherwise, and it's really curious to me. Actually, it's quite alarming that you haven't read the opinion, because your agency is listed in this opinion. The federal court looked at volumes of evidence over months of litigation, and they determined, among other things, that if the allegations made by the plaintiffs, the states in this case, are true, and hold on, the preliminary injunction was granted against your agency, sir, and other Biden administration agencies, including the DOJ and FBI, the court said it involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. And you're telling me this opinion issued July 4th has not reached your desk? No one's briefed you on it?
Oh, I have been briefed on the Missouri litigation.
Okay, but you haven't taken the time to read it yet.
Congressman,
No, hold on. Have you read it or not?
I have read parts of it,
Oh,
Congressman.
parts of it. Did you read the parts where it said that this is Orwellian and dystopian and that your agency is involved in a massive cover-up of specifically conservatives' free speech online?
Congressman, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is not involved in such conduct.
Okay, well, the court found otherwise, and you stand here under oath and you give us these answers that we know are not true because this is demonstrably untrue. I'm suggesting to you that you're saying things to us under oath that are proven by the record to be untrue. Let me ask you about this specifically.
Okay, so that was a little bit of the clip of Mike Johnson. So we just got to hear. This is the guy who's going to be our speaker, and man, did he take Mayorkas to task on free speech issues. Leon, you were about to jump in before we got to this. Real quick.
No, the guy's name is Alexandro Mayorkas, and you said Michael Mayorkas.
Oh, sorry. Boy, I tell you, I'm like Biden with names.
I was going to say that, but I decided not to.
Well, but one thing I wanted you to see though is that, and James, maybe we could bring this visual up. Here is an article from the AP. So, I mean, you've heard Mayorkas saying in response, no, sorry, we don't do that. Well, this is literally an article from the Associated Press saying that this is exactly here's the judge in the case, U.S. District Judge Terry Doherty of Louisiana, and here's what he said of the evidence in that case. He said Doherty cited substantial. Let me highlight this here. Substantial evidence of a far-reaching censorship campaign. He wrote that the evidence produced thus far depicts an almost dystopian scenario during the COVID-19 pandemic, a period perhaps best characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty. The United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. Okay, so I mean, you know, and quite frankly, they go on and they talk about other things in the article too about them censoring conservatives and other stuff. This is what the court found, and here Mayorkas is just sitting there lying to Congress, and Johnson is calling him on it. So you know, kudos to Johnson for doing this. And by the way, if you're listening to us on public access, we've reached the point of that show or point of our show where we're going to have to break away. But the conversation does continue online. We're going to talk a little bit more about Johnson's school choice and sort of Hillary's thought policing here. But if you want to check out that, go online and you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube. And you can also find a lot of other conversations we've had with other people fighting for liberty across the country and in your region. So leave us some comments there and go check out the rest of the conversation. Okay, so we're back to the show here, and I wanted to show, you know, not only, you know, here's an AP article. It literally just gets behind everything that Johnson is saying. But let's hear a little bit more of Johnson bird-dogging Mayorkas, because, I mean, it is just, you know, profound that you just don't hear this kind of caliber of politicians holding these government agencies to, you know, to task. So, James, could I get the next clip 4?
Can you define what misinformation is?
Congressman, misinformation is false information that is disseminated to...
Excellent. Who determines what is false?
Congressman, our focus...
No, who determines what is false in your agency?
Congressman,
if you're going to pull something off the internet and collude with a social media platform to make sure Americans don't see it, who determines what's false?
Congressman, we don't do that.
That's not true. That is not true. That is not what the court has found. This is not a Republican talking point. This is what the documents show. We've had people testify under oath that say, and you just defined the term, you're telling me that you don't know who determines what is false?
Congressman, what we do at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is identify the tactics that adverse nation states use to weaponize disinformation.
Okay, what is disinformation? What is disinformation?
Disinformation is inaccurate information.
Who determines what's inaccurate? Who determines what's false? Do you understand the problem here? The reason the framers of our Constitution did not create an exception for quote-unquote false information from the First Amendment is because they didn't trust the government to determine what it is. And you have whole committees of people in your agency trying to determine what they define as false or misinformation.
That is not true.
Well, then what is true? Please enlighten us.
What we do is we disclose the tactics that adverse nation states are utilizing to weaponize information.
No, sir. The court found specifically, it's a finding of fact that is not disputed by the government defendants, the Biden administration, your agency, the FBI, or DHS, not in the litigation. They determined you and all of your cohorts made no distinction between domestic speech and foreign speech. So don't stand there and tell me under oath that you only focused on adversaries around the world, foreign actors. That's not true.
Congressman, the Missouri case, the litigation to which you refer, is the subject of continuing litigation.
But the facts were not disputed, and I so regret that I'm out of time. I hope I get some more yielded. I yield back.
Gentlemen, so there you have it. That's our new speaker. And boy, I tell you, I think if our founding fathers were here, there'd be a standing ovation for Mike Johnson on trying to hold our government accountable. And if this were a libertarian, I don't think a libertarian could have said it any better than Mike Johnson said it in that particular thing. Anyways, what do you guys think about this? Because I'm impressed.
Go ahead, Leon, because I couldn't hear it, and I've got it.
Well, the thing is that this Alexandria Mayorkas, he's the same guy who have gone under oath and tell us that the border is secure, and then we have millions of people pouring across our borders since Biden has been president, okay? But he's been insisting the border is secure. So I don't know how they define secure. Now we don't know how we define what is false. He don't define, he have defined them, but he can't tell us who determines what is false and what is inaccurate. Okay, this department, the Department of Homeland Security, is a serious problematic agency. They are colluding with the social media platforms to censor Americans. I don't care what your political beliefs are. Okay, the government has no right to be censoring our thoughts, our speech, what we should think or what we should do. They have no right to be doing that. And we have a First Amendment right. Yet we have the FBI, we have the Department of Homeland Security, all participating in this. This is a real problem because this is a clear violation of the speech of the First Amendment. And we are not talking about just talking points from the right. We're not just talking about this is what the court found. A court made a finding of fact that this is what the government is doing. These are our First Amendment rights we are talking about. So we got to do something about this crap. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, and Tim, just to give you a sense, essentially the thrust of this was all about this issue of the government trying to censor our speech online. That was the majority of what he was going after Mayorkas about, and boy, did he let him have it. So yeah, and by the way, too, I'd heard Glenn Greenwald talking about him not too long ago. In fact, Glenn Greenwald had him on his show not long after he made that grilling of Mayorkas, and he had said that I think that's what Glenn Greenwald said. That's the one question everybody should be asking: is who determines, what is misinformation and disinformation? And it certainly shouldn't be the government telling us all what to believe. So,
and I really like Glenn Greenwald, okay, because he's a left winger. He and I will agree on nothing. I can tell you that. But at least the man is intellectually honest, okay? He's intellectually honest. He can see these things happening, and it's bad for everybody, not only for the right or for the left. It's bad for everybody, and I really like that about him. And I mean, it's just disturbing to see these things going on. Tim, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's about time. In addition to these acts being the exact opposite of what their name is, it sounds like some of these departments are the exact opposite of what their name is. So, Department of Homeland Security is basically the insecurity we feel in being able to voice our opinions. And I know we're going to talk about things related to the Department of Education, which is the Department of Uneducation. It should be, if it's properly named.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the decline in test scoring, and it's like pretty soon they're going to stop the test scoring so that they don't have to listen to people bellyache about how poor the United States is doing compared to other countries.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Tim, it's almost as though you checked out the topics. Because that is exactly where we're going with this. But yeah, I didn't think about the Orwellian tie-in to our Ministry of Education. The fact that it does everything but. But yeah, that's a good cue. That's a good transition, Tim, for us to jump over to that topic. So Leon had shared an article with us earlier in the week, and so we wanted to share that with the audience. And James, maybe you could pull this one up. It's Our Public Schools Are a National Disaster. And it talks about how the ACT testing, I think that's that stands for the American, gosh, what is it? Credentialing, or, oh gosh, I can't remember what ACT stands for. But essentially, this is like, yeah, it's like our SAT testing and ACT testing. It's the same thing. It's funny. I looked this up right before the show, but just like mangling names, I'm mangling this acronym too. But anyways, this is the testing that essentially, if you'd gone to applied to get into college out of high school any time in the last decades, on end, you would have had to give these standardized test scores as part of your competitive criteria for why you should get one of these scarce spots at the more desirable schools. And so one of the things that has happened in recent years with all this social justice wokeness is they've decided, well, they don't like the complexion of the people at the finish line after taking these tests. And so they've decided, well, let's just do away with the tests. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But our ACT scores, it says for 6 straight years, have been falling. And so it's sort of like, what better way to, sort of dodge the issue of how badly our education system is performing than, just sort of get rid of these tests. And that's precisely what they're doing. And for both the racial reasons I just mentioned, and the idea that maybe because we're doing so poorly on these tests, it's like, well, let's just destroy the metric if we don't like what the metric is telling us. And so it's here's an article from U.S. News and World Reports where it says that a lot of the colleges now have moved away from this. And we saw this, and we talked about this before on the show, how the UC system here in California had moved away from it more for the race issue. They didn't like the racial build of the student body, and they said, hey, we want to look differently. It doesn't matter how they think, we just want certain skin colors in certain mixes, and that's what we're after, and that's all we care about.
Certain blend, yes.
Exactly. And so it's led to the point where a lot of these schools, it says here in the article that some 1,900 schools now, I believe, are not even bothering to ask for this stuff anymore to see these standardized test scores. And it lists a few here of the schools that that are still asking for these, but there's not that many. So MIT apparently is keeping their standards up where they want to see these test scores. And there's a bunch of sort of red state universities here too that are also after this. But for the most part, a lot of these kind of woke schools are just getting rid of the metric altogether so that they can sort of pick and choose. And we saw this recently with the Harvard case that came in front of the Supreme Court with their admissions about the racial bias, where, the reason they're trying to get rid of these scores maybe. And in fact, here's a recent article that Fee had, and it's been on a bunch of other things as well. where they talk about this Asian kid who had near perfect SAT score, and he couldn't get it. He was rejected by almost all the colleges that he applied to. Why? Because just like Harvard was thinking, well, we've just got too many people who look like you. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
sorry, you don't get to come here because of the way you look, right?
yes,
Because your eyes look a certain way, your skin color looks away. In fact, they even developed a metric, and we talked about it before the show, that that said it had something to do with likability or something like
yeah,
that.
yes,
So they scientifically determined that Asians were less likable than people with darker skin colors, and so they literally they pushed them out. And if that isn't racism, I don't know what the hell is. I mean, because that's systemic to the point where you've literally developed a metric to keep people out that you don't like the way they look, and so you say, hey, I want people who look a different way. Sorry, this kid's name, his name is Stanley Zong. Sorry, Stanley, you don't get to
yeah.
come here because of the way you look. Anyway, so yeah, I'll let you
Sounds
guys jump on.
like George Wallace in 1960, 63 or 64, when he was standing in front of the doors of the University of Mississippi, so and we wouldn't let black people in. You know, we used to complain about that. You know, now we standing at the doors and not allowing Asians in. You know, because they don't have the right skin color, they don't have the right slant of the ears, or the slant of the eyes, or the slant of whatever hell it is they're thinking about. I just don't get it. We have now taken 1960, well, prior to 1960, I should say, prior to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, we have now taken that and transformed it and transported to 2023. And here we are, where we are making determinations by skin color. So what happened to Martin Luther King's statement of he wants his children to live in a society where they are judged not by the color of the skin, but by the content of their character? What happened to that? Where did we go wrong? Where did we fall off this path? That where we were making progress, where everybody was going to have rights and freedoms, and King's dream was going to come alive, where we will be living in this nation where we are judged not by the color of the skin, but by the content of our character. What happened to that dream? You know what happened? It has now become a nightmare, where we now have Jim Crow Point 2 going on in America, especially on the campuses. This is what's going on.
Yeah, Stanley would have something to say about that, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
And probably eloquently as well. But the less eloquent thing is for me to say, what was I going to say? Systematized. Yeah, talk about systematized. It sounds like this is a true example of systemic racism, because this has been systematized into these schools that have gone this direction. So yeah, if you want to complain about real systematized racism or systemic racism, there's your examples. That and the minimum wage law and the gun control laws and all these other systematic racist laws that attack black people primarily, or Asian people in this case.
Well, and here's the crazy thing, Tim. I mean, this wasn't really just attacking Asian people. I mean, this was attacking people. Essentially, the whiter you were, the worse it was for you, and the darker your skin color, the better it was for you. You know, the more they liked you and wanted you in there, and the less your test scores had to be. But here's the crazy thing: is that we're so brainwashed on this stuff that if it's happening to white people, it's not a big deal. But if you can show that it's happening to another minority group, then suddenly it's a big deal. And the bottom line is, as a libertarian, it shouldn't matter what your skin color is. It's your individual rights that should matter. And it's
Yes.
about government funding, and government should be blind to this. It's one thing, if it's a private institution and they want to be racist and they only want to, say, hey, we're the white hood club and you only get to come in if you wear your white hood. Okay, well, you guys have your fun, as long as you're not hurting anybody. you do whatever the heck you want to do. But once you get out there and you try and infringe upon other people's rights, that's when it becomes a problem. And these schools are taking government money, and then they're sitting there telling people, hey, you're not the right skin color, so we're not going to let you in. So
yeah, that's another issue. Maybe government money shouldn't be there to be taken. Maybe that's part of the huge problem here of why they're doing this and going this directions. And maybe that, where in the Constitution does it give the federal government the power to fund education? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it in there, Leon?
No, well, no. I mean, surely there's a whole discussion we can have about the government role in education and how it should function within our society. I'm open for that discussion. But the point is, though, what is happening here is the government making choices about winners and losers. That's what they're doing. And whenever they're doing that, we end up in a bad place. When they're doing that with human beings, we end up with Jim Crow as we had prior to 1960, 64, and 65. And now we are slowly heading back in that direction, where it's now a constitutional right to supposedly, I guess these colleges believe that, to discriminate against certain people depending on the shade or the hue of their skin or the slantiness of their eyes. I mean, this is truly Orwellian stuff, and this is bad for us. This is really, really bad for us, because if they could choose, if we could have one government choosing favorably for one group now, when a new government comes along, a new administration comes along, what is to stop them from choosing favorably for someone else? What is to stop them if we're gonna allow this? This is insane. This is insanity. We are going backwards here, not forward.
I can't help but notice too that the schools are so tied up, focused on this, and the whole point of why you shared that article with us is because the schools are failing in their core mission, which is
exactly
on their metric of their ACT scores of how well the students are learning, and the students seem to be learning worse and worse, and yet they want to dicker around with everybody's skin color. That's just gosh.
But you're raising a very good point, Jason. The fact of the matter is, Black and brown kids are getting the shitty. Oh God, I'm sorry. Are getting the worst possible education you could think about in a country that is supposed to be the richest country on planet Earth. The worst you could think about. There was a survey done not too long ago. I think it was in Baltimore. They looked at 23 high schools. They could not find, listen to what I'm saying here, they could not find a single kid who could read or do math at grade level. Now, if that is not a catastrophe, then I don't know what is. And the worst thing about this thing is, getting back to the article that was there, parents are now revolting. They are trying to get vouchers for their kids so the money could follow the child rather than fund a particular system that's in place and that is not doing their job. But who's always standing in the way? Is the teachers' unions. And of course, they always fund the Democratic Party. The teachers' unions are standing in the way of our children getting a decent education. Education is the escape from poverty. Go ahead, Jason.
And Leon, before you go too much farther into that, let me just introduce just show these articles for the audience that you've shared, so that we can, give them a little bit of foundation on this. So what is the solution then to, these terrible government schools and their focus on race and wanting to destroy test scores that reveal how terrible they're doing? Well, it's competition. And Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual on this. So it's voucher systems are one of these things that have popped up recently in a lot of places. And let's see, here's the American Federation for Children, and they give some statistics here where this is becoming more and more popular. A lot of places are starting voucher programs. They say there's about 12 states that have voucher programs. There's some that have educational savings accounts that'll help people pay for something other than this public education or government-run public education. There's different tax credit programs out there, and so there's a lot of states states that are starting to push a lot of resources towards these alternatives. And it's funny too, even Barack Obama, when he first came in, I remember he was actually trying to promote school choice just a little bit, I think, before the
Yes.
teachers unions, sort of bent him back to their will. But it's and back then they actually had that documentary that's worth checking out too, Waiting for Superman, and the
Right.
idea that, hey, this ain't going to fix itself. We can't sit around waiting for some white knight to come in and fix everything. And the solution is choice, and letting people vote with their feet on where it is they want to send their kids. And so there's just a little bit of you can check out more of from the Federation for Children, American Federation for Children, about some of these statistics. But these programs have become so popular that now they're running out of resources to fund these programs,
Funny
which
programs, yes.
is the article that Leon wanted to share with us. And this is, I guess, becoming a problem, where it's showing, hey, there's so many people who have so little faith in the government provided education that people are essentially running away from these things to the point where maybe they're going to become insolvent. Anyways, you guys want to jump in on that a little bit?
Go ahead, Leon.
Well, the thing is, Jason, that we, even though the lockdown was horrible, the COVID lockdown was horrible, the one good thing I think that came out of the lockdowns was parents got a better picture of what their kids are doing in these public schools. They really did. And this is where we saw an acceleration in the need for school choice. Some of those programs that you were speaking about, the voucher systems, we saw an acceleration, a greater intensity, a greater focus on doing these things. These public schools are a disaster, we know that. But I think either parents were complacent, or they were blinded by it, or blinded by some of the fuzziness of all of it. But once the lockdowns came and they went remote, and parents were able to see what was going on in our schools, this is where the intensity for vouchers and the intensity for school choice and for parents' choice and all these other things, this is where it started to accelerate. And that is the one good thing I have to give credit to for the lockdowns. And I don't agree with the lockdowns, but it's the one good thing that came out of it. And I hope that this will continue. We are seeing, of course, that article is showing that parents are demanding these vouchers now. They're running out of resources. I don't think there's a lack of money here. It's just that how the money is being utilized is the issue right now. That is what it is. Because we just say Iowa have successfully, I don't think they're fully implemented as yet, but they are successfully transitioning to an all voucher system. Arizona have done that. West Virginia is not far behind. And there are several other states where, and you just showed the articles, Jason, there are several other states where there's a lot of movement in this direction. But of course, the teachers' unions are there fighting for the current system as it is. And this is a real problem. But I hope to God parents will keep up the fight, because they have to educate their children. If we are not educating the next generation, God help us for the future of this great land of ours.
Yeah, that's good. I really don't have anything to add. That was good, Leon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're our Superman on this, Leon. Waiting for you to jump out.
I'll put on my red cape here pretty soon, man.
There you go. Okay. Well, I think we've gotten near the end of our show here, and so we want to share with you our Knucklehead Noise Patrol. And it's funny, this one kind of relates a little bit to the speaker stuff that we talked about early in the show, the Speaker of the House stuff, and some of the kind of thinking of the elites in Washington. And so we had this article here. And maybe you could share, pop it up there, James. Yeah, and it's Hillary suggests formal deprogramming for MAGA extremists who still support Trump. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Not just the idea that somehow she has the audacity to think that, hey, it's just the other side that looks and acts and walks like a cult. My gosh, I mean, some of the stuff coming out of the Democrat Party, I mean, it's just, you'd have to be deranged beyond belief to believe some of this stuff or to be in a cult. But anyway, so let's hear in her own words some of this. I've broken the interview up into a few different pieces because it was a little bit long. So we're going to put these in a little manageable chunks. But let's hear a little bit about some of what Hillary Clinton thinks about, sort of the MAGA people and what the solutions are for them.
Area of coalition building that could happen. There are pragmatic Republicans, as you say. Could there be a whole new way of trying to, get legislation going and cross-party governance going by Democrats and certain Republicans forming a coalition?
Well, you saw the number of Republicans who voted along with Democrats to keep the government open. So there's clearly a common sense, sane part of the Republican caucus in the House.
So the first thing I wanted to kick off right away is that she gets into the interview, and what makes somebody sane is that they want to keep the government running and keep funding it at any cost. That's her top criteria, which right away, I mean, as libertarians, we showed you that in fact, maybe we could bring that up again real quick, just so we see what sanity and insanity are here, right? This is our debt. This is what the government is telling us our debt is going to. Hillary Clinton's not worried about this trajectory of our debt. To her, that's that you'd have to be an extremist to be worried about this. Her big worry is that government, doesn't keep running, that the wheels of government keep going, and that this trajectory keeps going. That's what her concern is on this. So, anyways, let's jump into the next clip, because the next clip is even more interesting on what her solution is to deal with people who think like us that, hey, this is a problem.
There wasn't this little tail of extremism wagging the dog of the Republican Party as it is today. Mm-hmm. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen.
And how?
So now we're into an Orwellian deprogramming of the cult members. And quite frankly, anybody who doesn't like what she's doing is suddenly now a MAGA Republican. So, I mean, I don't like where the debt's going. And believe me, I have not voted for Donald Trump once. I have voted Libertarian all of these times. So, but I mean, to her, I'd be an extremist that is somehow clumped into MAGA and would need deprogramming. Did have one other clip, but did you guys want to jump in on this, because this is really bizarre stuff that she's talking about we need to start deprogramming.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
It doesn't surprise me coming from her. This suggestion of a formal deprogramming program. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, she's always been despotic and tyrannical as her whole career. And
Tim, looks like you froze.
Did I lose it?
I'm hearing you, Tim. Go ahead.
She's just always been despotic. So it's not
Leon Tim, one who's
you can hear me or no?
I'm hearing you, Tim. Jason, are you having a problem? I'm hearing Tim.
I think I got frozen out. Sorry about that. I don't know how my connection is bad.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
And so there we are. Leon?
Well, the thing is that, it's kind of hard taking from a twice loser in the presidential elections, who have remained bitter, who was beaten by Donald Trump, and now she think that some of us who have our thoughts about the debt, the national debt, and about the way the direction of the country, all of a sudden, some of us, I guess, need deprogramming, you know? Talk about Orwellian, talk about 1984, talk about a ministry of truth. Oh Lord, God help us if this woman ever become our Lord and Savior. God help us.
Yeah. Clearly, Majorca would be marching to Mayorkas, who we heard earlier, being interrogated by the new speaker,
Yes.
would be one of her best allies. but anyways, there is one more piece of the clip, and I wanted to share that with you because it's a little bit informative on what she thinks. So maybe we could share that last clip.
It's the classic tale of an authoritarian populist who really has a grip on the emotional, psychological needs and desires of a portion of the population. And the base of the Republican Party, for whatever combination of reasons, and it is emotional and psychological, sees in him someone who speaks for them.
So she just said that this is a whole emotional, psychological thing, that anybody who votes for Trump must just be bamboozled into depending upon the state to do something. She's describing her own party too in those. I mean, you could apply everything she said about people voting for Trump to people who vote for Democrats. I mean, they've been bamboozled to emotionally need these people to speak for them and provide for them. But you know, when she talks about this whole thing about being needing to be deprogrammed, like there's some kind of cult. I mean, imagine what it is that's coming out of the Democratic Party nowadays as far as cult think. I mean, we're literally talking about people who claim to support women's causes, who then, when you ask them, well, what's a woman? And they can't tell you. They won't tell you. I mean, they're the same people who will sit there and they'll say racism is terrible and it's a systemic problem that we have to deal with. And yet, as you heard in the show earlier, they support systemic racism in the same breath of keeping people out of schools for their skin color, you know, and you know, trying to get the right people in because of their skin color. So, I mean, this, you know, and then this idea that you can just keep on printing more and more money, you know, as though it's some sort of magic money making machine that, you know, we can. This all sounds like cult think, right?
Well, Jason, to go a step further on this, I don't know if you remember during the 2020 campaign for the presidency, Joe Biden was on a show called the Breakfast Club. I think it's run by some guy who calls himself Shamale the God or some kind of thing like that. And he said on the show, this is a national syndicated show. He said on the show, if you're having problems, you're speaking to his audience. His audience is primarily black.
And this is Biden who's saying this, right? Yeah.
Biden, yes. Biden is speaking now. Biden says, if you have problems deciding between me and Donald Trump, you ain't black. So talk about someone telling us black people how we should think, right? That's what he's doing. Telling us how we should think, how we should vote. And if we don't vote and think the right, quote unquote, the right way, we ain't black. We have
Leon, apparently they think you need to be deprogrammed because
obviously
you're not thinking the proper way a black person should think.
I'll have to run down by Hillary Clinton Center for deprogramming and get my right card, you know.
Yeah. Well, our screaming eagle is silent. I guess you've just been stunned by what you heard.
Never ceases to amaze me what's going on.
Yeah. The Ministry of Truth is here. That's what it is here. Okay. 1984 is here. Dystopia is coming too quick for us.
Well, you know, did you have any last thoughts there, Tim? Or
no.
I thought I cut you off there.
Listen,
Well, Well, I think that pretty much does it in a nutshell for this one. But thank you for joining us on this episode. And like I said, we've got a whole lot of other episodes online. You can check them out at Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Just look for Knuckleheads of Liberty.com, and you'll find we've interviewed a lot of people there and people representing organizations too that are fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. So we encourage you to check those out as well, and leave comments too. We'd love to hear from you. And until the next time, try and think of what you can do in your community to try and promote liberty in some way. Maybe there's something after hearing all these different people and their ideas that you could be doing, because we definitely need it. I mean, we see the thought police and all the others are out there running 24/7, and they've got money behind them, and the only way this stops is if you get up and start joining the cause and fighting for liberty. So thanks so much for joining us. Until the next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.